can't see anybody's
Hi
faces
everyone,
besides
and
Janie.
welcome to today's Google Hangout, AP Google Hangout. We're talking about baseball one more time, and my name is Eric Harvin. I'm the social media editor here at AP. I'm going to very quickly explain that for some reason I am simply a disembodied AP logo for today's Hangout, which is probably better for everyone who's involved anyway. I think Google Hangouts just changed some functionality within the last hour, so we're going to go with the flow. But everybody who actually has something smart to say, you'll be able to see their head and hear their voices. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. So let's start with, we've got Janie McCauley, who is an AP sports writer, covers West Coast sports. She's based in San Francisco, and I believe she's at AT&T Park right now. Is that right, Janie?
Yes, yes. Pirates, Giants in a couple hours.
Okay. Sounds great. And then we got John Krasinski. He is in Minneapolis. You're at Target Field, I believe. Is that right?
That's right, Eric. I'm at Target Field here, probably about 6 hours away from Rangers and Twins.
Okay, sounds good. Next we have Noah Trister. He's in Detroit. He's actually preparing to cover a Pistons game tonight. So very flexible and talented reporter. You want to say hello?
Hello. Tigers just finished their first homestand of the season, and they're in Chicago today playing the White Sox.
Okay. And then we have Paul Newberry. He's in Atlanta. You may have met Paul along with Janie a couple of weeks ago when we did one of these before. And he's on his lovely back porch, where you can see a little bit of nature. He's decided to go yard for today's hangout, and so there's natural grass behind him. Say hello, Paul.
Hi everyone, I've got my fake Masters birds in the background, and I'll soon be heading to the park. These guys are much more dedicated than me. I've got the Braves and the Brewers tonight at Turner Field.
Thanks a lot, Paul. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, because he's going to be able to ask and discuss baseball much better than I will, we got Ben Walker, who is an AP baseball writer based here in New York. He's across the newsroom from me, and I'm going to hand the baton over to him, and he's going to take the discussion from here. So, Ben, you want to take it?
Outstanding. Hey, everybody. Here in New York today, here in the office, kind of monitoring all the stories, all these fine stories all these writers are going to be sending today. I'll be tomorrow at Angels and Yankees. Here in New York today, it's opening day at Yankee Stadium. Always an exciting event. We have a couple of writers up there, and of course, opening day, whenever it is, whether it's in Tokyo, whether it's in Washington, whether it's in Seattle, wherever it is. We've had about 2.5 weeks of openers as it is. But it always makes you remember what it was like the first time you went to an opening day, maybe as a fan, as a kid, all these people out there. Noah, I mean, as a kid, did you ever go to an opening day? If you did, what was it like?
Yeah, the first time I went to an opening day, I was in 8th grade growing up in Washington, D.C., and a radio station had a trivia contest to win tickets to the Orioles opener that year. It was 1993, I believe. And the question on the air was, who was Eddie Murray traded for when he was sent to the Dodgers? And I'll let our viewers try to come up with that one on their own. But I said to say it was probably the first bit of trivia that I ever looked up in a media guide. And was able to stay on hold. 3 or 4 other people were on before me and couldn't get it, and I was able to give them the answer. And then my mother and I went up to Camden Yards for the Orioles opener against Texas.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
How about you, Ben?
You know, my first opening day, I was 11 years old, 1969. I also grew up in suburban Washington. It's a very exciting day in Washington. The Senators had been bad for a long time, but they had just hired Ted Williams as their manager. And I can still remember my dad was a Ted Williams fan. We went out there opening day against the Yankees. He had his nice shiny jacket. He came out there. Richard Nixon threw out the first ball, and back then the tradition was a lot different. I mean, the players all lined up. I mean, all 50 players lined up between the first base dugout and the first base line, kind of like a little melee. And Richard Nixon threw the ball into the middle of them in a scrum, and they all dove on, trying to get and capture this souvenir. And these players are piling on each other to get Richard Nixon to sign it. So it was a very, very, very exciting day. And everybody was on the ball that day. Now, so far, a week into the season, a lot of big hitters are not on the ball. We've seen some shutouts, low-scoring games. John had Albert Pujols in Minnesota, a place to hit the ball. Albert Pujols, how did he look to you?
Yeah, he looked like he's kind of searching a little bit, trying to adjust from the National League to the American League, seeing some new pitchers that he wasn't used to seeing, and I think his batting average is .217 right now, and that's less than the contract that he signed to go to Los Angeles. So, you know, everyone is pretty confident that he's going to start swinging the bat eventually, but in the games that we saw here, it looked like he was just pressing a little bit. Glenn Perkins, one of Minnesota's very good relievers, a lefty, came out of the bullpen in Game 2 and really just blew him away. You don't really see Albert Pujols dominated like that and in a bat very often, but he just he had 1 RBI in the series here. The Angels dropped 2 of 3, and the Twins were having their problems scoring runs until yesterday as well. So it just looks like early on, it looks like the batters are taking a little bit longer to catch up to the pitchers.
Hey, Ben, I just want to jump in. This is your disembodied logo speaking. I just wanted to tell everybody who's watching, I hope there are a few of you out there, if you have good questions or if you want to tell somebody there's some food on their face or anything, just comments about baseball, whatever you like, put it in the comments underneath this Hangout, and we'll answer your questions. Okay, back to you, Ben.
You know, you talk about players making adjustments. Of course, going from the National League to American League is a big adjustment. Now, you talk about coming from a different country to the United States playing Major League Ball. Janie, tell me about your new rising star in Oakland.
Yes, Yoenis Cespedes is off to quite a start. He had 3 home runs in his first 4 games, and all of them were against the Mariners. Obviously, sort of a strange situation here in Oakland because they opened with the Mariners in Japan, and those were 2 home games for the A's. They came back stateside, played some exhibition games, played the Mariners again, and now they're in Seattle for the Mariners home opener. King Felix is on the mound for the 3rd time in the first 8 games between these teams, and so Cespedes is the one who's sort of showing that he's got some pop that the A's want, but also has a lot of strikeouts, and that's one of the things he's really focused on right now is getting those strikeouts down. He's been hit by 3 pitches, Ben, including one that made for quite a wild finish a couple days ago. We can discuss that later, but 2 hit by pitches that ended the game. So no hits. As John was discussing in terms of offense, I saw a game end on back-to-back hit by pitches, including one on this new Cuban defector who's
Sure.
quite a hit.
Paul, you know, being in Atlanta for all those years, obviously you saw one of the greatest of all time. You saw the Hammer, you know, Hank Aaron, of course. Now the Braves started off getting swept in New York. You see some names on the Braves and you think, well, they should be able to score runs, but they're not. What's going on in Atlanta?
Well, the offense was the question coming in this year, Ben, because they admittedly struggled for consistency last year. For some reason, it just doesn't seem this lineup necessarily, this group of players meshes very well for some reason. I don't know. They didn't really all of last year. They were kind of very up and down, and they're off to kind of another slow start this year at the plate. I think they're getting about 212 as a team. They did get Chipper Jones back, which helped, and Jason Hayward's off to a decent start as well, homered the other night, so I think that's a good sign for him. But still kind of troubling that this offense, which if you look at all the individual pieces, looks like a decent offense, has kind of struggled to mesh together.
Sure. You know, early this season, they always talk about pitchers being ahead of hitters, and a lot of times weather has a lot to do with it. Weather hasn't been terrible so far, but some pitchers have already gotten off to real nice starts. Noah in Detroit. Tell me about Drew Smiley.
Drew Smiley is important to the Tigers for a couple reasons. He's the only left-hander in that rotation, and he made his Major League debut yesterday, pitched 4+ innings, gave up 1 run, you know, acquitted himself fine. He was drafted a couple years ago out of Arkansas, and he had never pitched above Double-A before this season, and he won the competition for the 5th starter spot in spring training. And he's an important member of that rotation because Max Scherzer did not look good at all in his first start, and Doug Fister has just gone on the disabled list. So what the Tigers got from Smiley yesterday was pretty encouraging.
Right. And you know, again, you always look for, at the start of the season, you always look for new players. It's always exciting around the majors. You're trying to track them and who they're doing. Of course, you want to see your familiar names do well. John in Minnesota. Obviously, it also goes through Justin Morneau and Joe Mauer. You saw a couple days ago, you saw Morneau have a really good game. What's the prognosis for Justin Morneau after several seasons here interrupted by concussions?
Yeah, Ben, it's been a long, slow climb back for him. He would get in the lineup for a few games and then seem to have more concussion symptoms, or he even got another one last year while kind of trying to track a fly ball as a first baseman. And so The Twins have played things really cautiously with him. They've really converted him into a full-time DH for the meantime to try and just limit the opportunities for those head issues to arise again. And Morneau was initially reluctant to do that because he wanted to be out in the field and helping this team. He's a very good defensive first baseman as well, but he kind of slowly came around to the idea of they need his bat in the lineup for this team to be successful. And so with the young guy Chris Parmelee kind of asserting himself at first base a little bit, there is a little bit more room for Morneau to slide in at DH and just ease into things. And you saw yesterday he really got a hold of a pitch late in the game, a 2-run homer that put the Twins up for good. And they just need that kind of power in the lineup because there wasn't a lot of that last year. And both him and Mauer homered yesterday, and that's the first time that's happened since 2010. And so that just kind of tells you the struggles on the injury front that this team has had with two guys who are former MVPs, and they plan to have as cornerstones of their operation. So if they can stay healthy and if Morneau can keep hitting them over the fence, they're going to be in a lot better shape than initially thought.
You talk about cornerstones here in New York, of course. You have A-Rod and Jeter on the left side of the lineup. Of the infield, second game of the year, the Yankees are already putting Jeter as the DH, trying to rest him a lot. So some question marks for that. Eric, speaking of questions and question marks, what do you got?
Yeah, got a couple of questions in for this. These are from Jim. He's got has a lot of questions about baseball books. He wants to know whether anybody here has read Grisham's new book, and also see if anybody has any thoughts about Ball 4, Jim Bouton's book. Or also generally, do you have any favorite baseball books? So let's talk literature, folks. What do you like?
Let's talk a little literature. Paul, you and I certainly were around when Ball 4 came out. It was pretty shocking back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it looks pretty tame these days, though, doesn't it, Ben? But I can't imagine in those days when you didn't talk about Mickey Mantle seeing 3 baseballs coming at him and hitting the one in the middle. That was a new ground. But again, I recently, a couple of years ago, read Ball 4 again, and it's just really tame in comparison to today's books.
I remember when Jim Bouton wrote that book, and of course that kind of broke the sanctity of the locker room. You always would hear, and I think many of us have seen signs in locker rooms that say, literally, I remember the Phillies locker room used to have a sign that said, what you see here, what you say here, let it stay here when you leave here. And of course, Jim Bouton broke all that, and of course he was almost like a pariah among some places in the major league. It's funny, my wife is in the dance world, and they recently had a dance competition, and Jim Bouton was one of the judges. I was like, I hope you dance people know what you're getting into.
Wow, y'all were scraping the barrel there for judges, weren't you, Ben?
I would say. Janie, as far as books, anything you especially come across this year, last year, a couple of years, anything you like? Noah, anything?
Well, I guess Moneyball is still fresh out here because of the movie about the A's coming out last year, and Brad Pitt, and quite a cast. And so Moneyball is suddenly back. It's several years old, but it's back in the mix because of the movie that was made, and that was fun. I kind of enjoyed the movie. There were some things that weren't right on, but it was entertaining. It was Hollywood.
Hey, Joni, I meant to ask you, did any of the writers or press media people in Oakland, did any of them make it into the movie as extras?
I do not think so, but I believe Susan Slusser was there for some days of the filming. I would have to get back to you on that, but we all had a ball finally getting to meet Brad Pitt when he came through for the premiere. And
what was he like?
He was great. He answered everybody's questions. He looked us in the eye. He was thoughtful. I said to somebody recently, you see these actors and actresses, and you think they're so much taller, and
right.
Some of them aren't that big, really. So, but
Janie,
he was entertaining.
Janie, are you saying so? Basically, he's not like your tall, big right fielder. Is he more like a second baseman? Would you see him like that?
Yeah. I think I compared him with you guys to Ichiro, a little smaller than Ichiro, but he was really charming, and took time to answer everybody's questions, which was nice. So I get that's a little off the book path, but it goes back to the book on the small budget A's.
Sure. Now Noah, of course, you went to Princeton, so you probably did a lot of reading in there. What's the physics and literature? Any baseball in there for you, Noah?
I was going to say Moneyball too, and the interesting thing is just sort of I looked back at that and it's hard to believe it's been, I guess, 10 years now since that book came out, and you almost wish they would do a sequel, because I think, you know, a number of other teams have sort of adopted some of those philosophies, some more than others, and now, of course, it would sort of be interesting to look at Oakland and sort of where they've gone since that book came out, because they had, you know, great success at that time, and they made it to the ALCS in '06, and now it's been sort of a constant adjustment for them, trying to stay competitive now as other teams sort of start to adopt the same philosophies they did.
Well, you know, no doubt Moneyball for a while was just the talk of baseball. And of course, the last week, I think the talk of baseball has been Ozzie Guillen and what he said and the resulting punishment. I think when the Miami Marlins hired Ozzie Guillen, you know, when you get him, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get something volatile is going to happen. I don't know if they expected it this soon. Janie, you've been around some players from Cuba this week. What have they been thinking about this?
You know, Ben, they would rather not even touch on the subject. Cespedes just got in the country. He's learning 2 new English words a day. A couple of the guys on the Kansas City Royals are thrilled for their countrymen. I mean, these guys seem like they're staying upbeat about what they're doing in this country and sort of staying away from that. They've got their own business to deal with. I think that's Ozzie's deal, and they are happy to be in this country getting their chance and don't even want to go there and get involved in anything political that could be taken the wrong way.
Sure. And Paul, you wrote a nice column for the AP, column on Ozzie Guillen. What do you think?
Well, my first reaction was, what's the surprise? I mean, this is Ozzie Guillen. I don't know that this was the worst thing he's necessarily said since he got to Miami, but I don't know. I mean, I understand it was not a smart thing to say. I mean, in South Florida with that population and how they feel about being forced from their homeland and wanting to go back, and it's not a smart thing to say, but I don't know. I thought the reaction maybe was a little overblown. I was quite surprised to actually hear many people calling for him to be fired. That I thought that was maybe a little harsh.
No, what do you think?
Well, anyone who covers Ozzie Guillen, and I'm sure John can attest to this too, being in the American League Central, you sort of learn very quickly not to take anything that comes out of his mouth too seriously. And I think this is sort of a case of, I mean, he's in a new environment now with new fans who don't know him all that well, and he made the mistake of not filtering himself at the outset. I think if he'd been in Miami, 4 or 5 years, and the people there had a chance to get to know him a little bit and understand what he's like on a day in and day out basis, then maybe these comments that he made wouldn't have come as such a shock.
Right, no doubt. And people like listening in right now, you might hear background sound. It sounds like there might be some ballpark music. Maybe they're at Target Field, or maybe in San Francisco. Here, you might hear some talk in the background. Right here, right before we started the Hangout, we were talking softball, AP softball. For all you fans out there, is a very big deal, and my star pitcher Fred Leaf is sitting across from me here and trying to make some roster moves today. Yes, I hear there's a guy who used to play for the Rockies who's kind of available for us, so we're kind of going in there. Eric, what you got?
Thanks, Ben. We got a couple of questions in. These are for Noah. This is about the Tigers. One of them, this is from John, who says, "Why do the Tigers keep keeping Brandon Inge around?" I guess this is somebody who's in Toledo who's saying he's 1 for 9 here in Toledo. Is he worth the trouble? And while you're talking about the Tigers, David, who grew up watching Cecil Fielder, is wondering how Prince Fielder is settling in with the Tigers.
Well, first on Inge, I mean, I think it sort of remains to be seen what role he'll play with this year's Tigers and what his future is in Detroit. He has 1 year left on his contract. He's certainly somebody that has some value defensively still. On a team that he's not really built for defense right now. But he's going to have to hit a lot better than he did last season in order to crack that lineup on an everyday basis. As far as Prince, we were talking earlier about hitters who are having a hard time, getting started this season. Prince is not one of them. He's been fine. He and Cabrera both hit 2 home runs apiece in the second game of this season. He's settling in quite nicely to that cleanup spot. And I talked about defense earlier, but so far him at first base and even Miguel Cabrera at third have looked fine for the Tigers. So they've been pretty encouraged by what they've seen out of those two so far.
All right. And Paul, I see you in the backyard there. I know you kind of probably been a place and a setting for some backyard barbecues, I imagine. There, you and Linda Lou and Hudson. Janie in the ballpark there. Now, of course, you're about 10 feet away from where the smell of garlic fries comes wafting up. What do you got in ballpark food? Anything new this year in San Francisco? They're always very innovative.
You know, Ron Blum eats most of the garlic fries when he's in town, so I will have to go check and make sure that they've got a good supply after he was here during the trial last year. But, you know, I'd actually like to take this one to Oakland, where the food got really interesting, Ben, this week, because Jeff Francoeur of the Royals, their right fielder, became a fan favorite by last year throwing up a baseball to these fans covered in a $100 bill with instructions to buy bacon and beer. So they've now made T-shirts in this small section of stands that say Bacon Tuesday, and it was just the second annual Bacon Tuesday. On Wednesday, Francoeur had 20 mini pizzas sent up to these fans in the middle of the game. And so I'm taking the food to a little different level there, but I think that was a pretty neat gesture on Francoeur's part, and he's suddenly got great fans over there in Oakland.
No doubt. And John, I know a little, I've not been to Target Field yet, but I know a little about the food. Someone we used to have to work here, I know someone who used to work here in the office has the concession on ribs at Target Field. So I've been hearing about that. How's the ballpark fare at Target Field?
It's great, Ben. You got to get out here for the food, if nothing else. I mean, Target Field does it right in pretty much every respect, from the setting to the field to everything, and then the concessions. I mean, we have, you know, it's a big fishing area. They land at 10,000 lakes here, and they have walleye on a stick and
walleye on a stick.
Yes, absolutely. And they have Tony Oliva has a place here, and it's and so he has a Cuban sandwich that's out of this world. They added a cheese stuffed meatball to the menu this year. Anything you could want.
Healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's anything that you could want. If you want to feel a little guilty about putting on a few extra pounds, come on out here. You'll have no problem with that. It's all really good stuff.
John, I'm still thinking about the walleye on a stick. I'm not so sure about that. John, how much of a walleye on a stick? How much would that run me? What do you think?
Oh, I think it's around $9 or so. It's not cheap. So it's you know, the state fair here in Minnesota is one of the biggest in the country, and they put everything on a stick, and you know, and candy bars on a stick, and ribs on a stick, and pork chops on a stick, and all this. And so that was kind of their homage to the state fair, is a deep fried walleye on a stick, and it goes over pretty well here with some Grain Belt beer, that's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think the Twins could use Morneau and Maurer getting on the stick a little bit there. Yes,
absolutely, absolutely.
Eric, checking in here, Mr. Carvin, what do you got?
Yeah, I've got some follow-up questions on Ozzy. I've got to talk about him a little bit more. Jim is asking whether we think Ozzy will survive. What are the sentiments out of Miami, if anybody knows anything about that? And is he actually close to Hugo Chavez? We heard some talk that he might be.
Paul, do you think he's going to survive? I mean, I personally, I don't see him getting fired.
I don't either. I think they've got a lot invested down there in Miami with the new ballpark, all the new players, and Ozzy was a big part of that. I'm sure they would have preferred that he not do that interview with time, have this happen 5 games into the season. But I think they'll see. I would assume it'll kind of blow over a little bit, and he'll have to kind of crawl on his knees for a while for forgiveness there in Miami. But he's obviously shown he's a good manager, and I can't imagine him cutting ties this quickly with that.
No, as far as his connection with Hugo Chavez, you know, I know Ozzy being from Venezuela has been there and he's spoken about him. So I believe there is some friendship or relationship there. I believe there is something to that effect. I think I've seen that in the past. As far as anything with Fidel Castro, I don't know of anything there. I know, 10 or 12 years ago when the Orioles played an exhibition game in Havana, I went down there for that. And it was quite striking, certainly, to see Fidel Castro striding across the field. It was really something to see those games in Havana. I'm sure, after all that, I remember there was so much talk about how many players were going to come from Cuba and all this great talent coming to the major leagues, and never really panned out, especially hitters, especially power hitters. I remember watching the Orioles and the Cuban stars in batting practice, and not, as I remember, not a single player hit a ball over the fence in batting practice, not one. And the Orioles, I remember Mike Bordick was hitting the ball over the fence. But of course, Janie, this might be changing. I mean, you might have the first real, big power hitter in recent years. But you might have him right there at Oakland.
Maybe so. Obviously, he's going to go through an adjustment phase. The other Cubans I talked to this week on the Royals, and even his translator, who pitched in the major leagues for the A's and has been called off his minor league coaching assignment, has said it could take a while. I mean, there are so many things he's learning aside from just what he's doing on the baseball field. He's striking out more than he would like, but then his batting practice is being compared to Barry Bonds and the Bash brothers, Jose Canseco, Mark McGwire back in the day. That's how much fun it is to watch this guy's BP. His teammates are watching it, the scouts are watching it, the fans are watching it. It's highly entertaining.
I'm watching here, we have the Yankees game on TV, and they just hand around the crowd, and Henry Kissinger is here, and Billy Crystal, Tracy Morgan. Opening day, you always see a lot of people in the ballpark. Janie, anybody at the ballpark today with Pirates Giants?
Yes, Antonio Gonzalez, my comrade here, has said that Joe Torre's over in the Pirates clubhouse. I went over there earlier, and nothing much was going on yet, but Willie Mays is here. They've also having the 50th anniversary of the 1962 World Series team, Ben. So Gaylord Perry's here, Felipe Alou, some of the other greats. I haven't seen Willie McCovey or Orlando Cepeda yet, but we usually have a Hall of Famer on hand most days, which is we're a little bit spoiled having these guys around every day. It's a treat.
It really is. The Yankees are very much that way also. You see Yogi Berra in the clubhouse often. Doesn't really tell a whole lot of jokes. I mean, you think, but he's always fun to have. John, in Minnesota, any guys around?
Yeah, not right now. We get Burt Blyleven here. He's a Twins color analyst, and so he's around all the time. You'll see Tony Oliva here pretty regularly as well, but the one guy that I keep thinking back to right now is Harmon Killebrew, who would come here occasionally every summer, still very close with the Twins organization before he passed last summer, and that took a lot of wind out of the sails of this organization. He was a beloved guy and just the nicest guy you could ever meet, a Hall of Famer, Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame person, and whenever we talk about things like that, about seeing some of the greats at ballparks, I always think back to Harmon Killebrew, because he was, couldn't have been nicer to a young guy like myself who never really saw him play, but always enjoyed hearing his stories, and all the players would just gravitate to him when he came around, and he passed last summer, and they had an emotional memorial service for him, and it was wonderful, and there's still a big number 3 hanging out here for his jersey being retired, and so even though he's gone, he's certainly not forgotten around here.
And Paul, is the Hammer still around once in a while?
I'm hoping he'll be around tonight. That's still one of the great thrills. Just anytime he walks into a stadium or you're into a room. But he had some knee replacement surgery, I think about 2 months ago. So I'm hoping he's recovered enough to be out at the park tonight. He's not out there frequently, but it's always kind of a thrill when he shows up.
And in Detroit, the great Al Kaline is around sometimes, is he not?
Oh, yeah, always. He's still very involved in the team. He was down at spring training. We see Willie Horton a lot. Willie actually popped in on Bobby Valentine's first news conference with Boston before their opener here last week, and wished him luck. So, yeah, a number of the all-time greats from the Tigers are still around the ballpark.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate everyone's help today. Maybe we can do this again sometime. Maybe by the time we talk next time, Jamie Moyer will have a win. I keep rooting for him. Of course, I would love to see him come back and win a game at age 50. That would be really something. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think there'll be a chance. But I appreciate everybody being around for the ballparks and everything else. Eric?
Yeah.
I believe it's time for all of us to go play ball.
Yeah, I think we've got some ball games to cover. Well, not me, but everybody else. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank all of you, certainly, and everybody watching from wherever you are on your device of choice. And thanks for those who asked questions, very good ones. And it's a really great conversation. We'll do this again soon.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.